Hey, welcome to the Silo Podcast. We strive to showcase the diverse talents and passions of our vibrant and dynamic local creative community. Follow along as we explore the creative process, share stories of inspiration and collaboration, and connect with fellow creatives who are making an impact in our community. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, this is a show for anyone who believes in the power of creativity to change lives and communities. This week, we are recapping the thoughts that Emil had from our March event, MOSAIC. She took some awesome time to connect with our crowd and learn more about them. We spoke about some pain points that we all felt as creatives and also mentioned burnout and mental health. Can't wait to get into this one.
Okay. I am a photographer. This whole conversation, that last bit of it, is where I've been living for the last 2 years. So what I was going to talk about is like, we're going to switch it up a little bit. I'm just going to wing it because that is such a heavy conversation. I'm going to talk about my creative journey first, but I've been kind of stuck in a 2-year burnout that I am trying to claw myself out of. So I feel like that whole conversation, as a creative, when you take the leap to make that creativity how you're paying your bills, there's a danger to squashing creativity when you're not taking the time to create for yourself. And I've been so in the hustle of growing my business, trying to change things up. Surprise, I also own a second photography studio with 2 of my friends. That's only 4 years old. Slice of Lime is 11. So when I met these guys, I referred to myself as the elder creative because I'm probably old enough to be some of your parents. So I'm going to talk about my creative journey, but I'm actually going to spend a lot of time and would love some banter about just the importance of when you are a portrait photographer and you're creating for others, that danger where you just kind of shelf all your creativity and you're focused on creating, of course, and creating an experience for your clients, but that you still have to make time to nurture what led you to the craft in the first place. So a little bit about me. Like I said, I am the elder creative in the room. I started out actually going to school for criminal justice. So I have a criminal justice degree, and the only way I use it is listening to true crime podcasts. I'm running 2 photography studios, and my journey started creative-wise. All through high school, I was an art kid. I was thinking I was building a portfolio to apply to art school. And then I was going to be the first kid in my family to go to college. And then it was like, oh, you're going to Westchester. Sounds cool. I think I'll go there too. That was my process for how I chose a college. I do not recommend that. And decided on criminal justice because I punked out and just became so fearful about having to submit a portfolio that I tabled that. So from 2002 through 2017, when I left to run Slice of Lime full time, I worked in adoption and foster care. In fact, when I pulled up here, I was like, yo, I taught a foster care class in this building on the other side of the building. So I did the foster care adoption thing for many years. I also worked in high security lockdown facilities with youth. And what that led to was me discovering a passion for people, for youth, specifically youth from traumatized backgrounds. And it was there in that course of work for those several years that I started to really love photography. I did a lot of work with adoption, and in adoption units of service, we would have to create life books for the kids and just work with them to help them find a sense of self within this craziness that they were living through being a part of the child welfare system. So my very first senior that I photographed was actually one of the clients on my caseload. And that just sparked this love in me for connecting with kids through this avenue of photography. Fast forward to giving too much of myself in that then I burned myself out, because any of you familiar with the child welfare system, A lot of people care, and when they care a little too much, they burn themselves out pretty quickly. I, however, stayed like 5 years past my expiration date, went on a trip to the desert with some other photographer friends. I swore that I would not leave to start running Slice of Lime full time until I insert expectation here. But the burnout got the best of me that I got to the point where I was sick for like 2 months straight. Had gastro issues, just had like random fevers that I couldn't shake. And so eventually I said, forget this, I'm out, kind of. I dropped part-time at my job, and that only added to the stress because I dropped to part-time, but my responsibilities, I was still supervising 9 to 10 people, massive caseload. I gave my notice that I was leaving, and then my husband had this crazy back surgery happen, and he's like, you're gonna have to delay this, and I'm like, abso-freaking-lutely not. I can't take one more minute of that. And it was one of those things where, you know, I was doing this art thing all through high school. I went skirt and went this way, and then I came back full circle to doing the creative thing. That scary moment with my husband, I thought was gonna like send me back, but I was determined to make it work. So for the last 11 years, I've been working with teens and youth, creating, am I covering the thing? Creating portraits. So the challenge with that is that for me, I feel like photography is the tool that I use to give somebody an experience. When people ask me what my superpower is, I always say that it is my superpower to make these kids that step in front of my lens feel seen. For me, the greatest compliment isn't, oh my God, I love what you did on this shoot, or these creative shoots that you do are so rad. For me is how that person feels walking out of my studio. So whether it's 5 minutes, when I do work, I still do work with the Statewide Adoption Network where we do photo shoots with kids. They come in, I give them the same kick butt experience that I would give any paying client, but it's amazing. Listen, I had to remind myself that I am in a church and Jesus does not want me to curse in his walls. For me, the experience that people get is just so much more important than what I can do with a camera. I feel like with cameras and photography being so much more accessible these days, anybody can make a good picture anymore. So for me, the end product, of course, makes sure that I can pay my bills. If I'm making crappy pictures, like parents aren't gonna buy them and I'm not gonna have food on my table. But the experience that I give kids is what's allowing my business to continue to grow. But I've been leaning so hard into this, gotta pay my bills, gotta be the top person around here, gotta make people like feel awesome, that I have completely tabled any creativity. So hearing you describe, you know, if there's not a means to an end, why do it? Or I'm paraphrasing now, but I've kind of been stuck in that. And I feel when we were talking out there, I asked, like, is your creativity like an outlet for, you know, the pressures of working in healthcare or whatever? And for me, like, the creativity was the outlet from the pressures of working in adoption and foster care. And now I'm doing what I wanted to do, and it's my life's passion and get great feedback. I'm still being able to pay my bills, but I feel so dead inside creatively. So I am up here as the elder. Just, you really have to find ways to lean into creating for yourself outside of the means to an end, outside of getting a paycheck. Surrounding yourself with other creatives. When I met these guys, I didn't bump into them on the street, but I too was like, dude, how the heck have you like found your purpose at such a young age and then like put so much action into living it out so quickly? I'm like 44 years old. Listen, you're always going to be figuring it out. When you get to the point where you feel like you're not learning anymore, I mean, what's the point? There's always something that can be learned. You guys like killed it. I'm like sitting here like, yes, because so many of the things that you were saying just about the creative process, you have to nurture that. And I know Helen and I have had some conversations via DM about that, because I feel like I've been stuck in this season of burnout where I'm seeking inspiration, and then I feel like so inspired by I love watching videos, interviews like Jack mentioned of other creatives. I draw so much inspiration from people outside of my field, just how their brains work, what they're thinking when they're creating. But then I just sit with it and I'm not doing anything. So that whole comment about ideas are a revolving door, it's like I create like an idea, but then I just shelve it. So then when I see somebody else do it, not the idea itself that I was coming up with, I'm like, that's too similar to what I was thinking about. So I kind of need to just sit with, like, table it because somebody else has already done it. So one of the things, when I first started to think, okay, maybe I might want to do this photography thing, like for real, I attended a workshop, and it wasn't about camera anything. It was called Finding Your Why. And for me, right now, I'm trying to lean into that my why is my passion for people and how I make them feel, with photography being the tool that I use for that. But that also can only take you so far. So, dang, I turned this into a therapy session. But right now, like, I'm just feeling so inspired by those youngins that just are really doing their part to create a place where people can feel safe to share their vulnerabilities, and just talk about those things that, yes, fuel them, but also the obstacles. And right now, the obstacle is I'm in this for 11 years, and there is still joy, but the joy is coming from the interactions with clients, but then you're pouring your all into that then there's nothing left for yourself. And how many of you have heard of Maggie Rogers? Okay, I'm slightly obsessed with Maggie. Saw her twice in the last month. And I watched an interview with her talking about how after her last tour, she had put so much into the building of community and got so high off of that then when it came time to create, she didn't have anything left to give. And that's literally, when I saw that, it's like 2 a.m. I'm sitting on my couch on my laptop crying because this lady I've never met is like putting to words, what I've been feeling. And for me, I feel like that's part of the journey. And what I'd love is to hear from you guys, those of you, I know you're kind of in a season of that right now. Just want to open a dialogue specifically about burnout. If you've experienced it, where you're at with working through it, and us just talking about that for a little bit, because we're going to be ending the night of talking about burnout. So who wants to share a little bit about some challenges that they've experienced as far as their creative process and where they're at?
First of all, I've been following you for maybe 11 years. I don't know.
Are you Nate?
No, Jason Langheim.
Yes.
I've been following you for a long time. So the first thing that stood out to me with you was your color, like the way, just your color theory. And anyway.
That's a passion too.
Yeah. Well, the thing I wanted to share was, so I've been shooting commercially for 11 years. And that's always been like as an in-house photographer at one place or another. The last place that I was at, we were grinding all the time to produce, client work all the time. And I was like, look, we have to have one day a month. We need to have some kind of program where we need to, first of all, build our portfolio. And that's going to be because people hire you for what they see you do. And so there was frustrations that we kept getting hired for a certain style that was boring and not inspiring to anybody. Yeah. Yeah. So whatever people see in your portfolio, that's what they're going to hire you for. And the whole team, the whole company was like, we would like to be doing this, because I get inspired pretty easily, and I get very passionate about things. And I'm like, look at this, and but it was always, well, we can't do that. The client doesn't want that. And I'm like, well, that's because we got the wrong clients. If we were doing this and people saw us doing that, then that's what we would get hired for. And so anyway, what I'm just trying to get to, like, a piece of advice is, if you're in this situation where you're feeling uninspired or you're not creating for yourself, one thing to do is to just say there's this one day a month where I'm going to create something for myself. And throughout that month, you can build your inspo and you can kind of plan here and there, but without putting too much pressure on yourself. But setting yourself up for success basically on that day. And then this ties into, like, this other piece of advice I have is, like, to have high standards, but forgive yourself if you don't hit those standards, which is something that's very hard for most of us. Like, we know what we want to create and we know we want this excellence. And then when we don't hit it, we're like, oh, I suck, like, I'm just not who I thought I am, and or whatever. But you just have to forgive yourself, because all of that only comes with risk. Like, if you don't take the risk, you're never going to succeed. It's as simple as that.
How did that work out for your team?
They loved it, and it was wonderful. It gave everybody another thing to be. So, like, the client work is, just the regular. I don't mean to be taking up all this time, but. But like what you were describing was sort of a carousel where the creative work was your outlet from your boring work, the corporate work, whatever. But then over time, once you made the transition, then over time, your creative work became the grind, and now you need an outlet from the creative work. But what are you supposed to do? And how am I supposed to get an outlet from creativity? Like, it's like a paradox.
Seeing what these younger kids are like creating right now is just blowing my mind. I just redid my website in January, and digging through my old stuff, I texted Landon, one of my business partners in Source, dude, my stuff from like 3 and 4 years ago is more creative than anything I'm putting out now. So that was like, did I do anything about it? No, I'm still in the woe is me instead of the action part. I'm still very much in that, like, I haven't taken action part, but thank you for sharing that. And I actually have to do the follow through on that, because we've talked about doing that, but then don't actually do it.
Hi, I'm Gordy. I'm from Lancaster. I live in the city with my wife, Joy. I play music. That's my thing. That's my outlet. And kind of like what this guy was saying, like well, you and I are different in the way that you mentioned that you struggle with imposter syndrome. I am dominated by imposter syndrome, so much so that I get scientific about it to the point where I think about the congestion of the industry a lot, and you also compete in a congested industry as well, very, very much so. As easy as it is to like record a song now, either like on your phone or on your computer, a laptop, it's also very easy to be a photographer in all sorts of capacities. Without sounding terribly dogmatic, do you have a criteria for like what it takes to be a runner in an industry besides talent, which is a subjective thing?
For me, even though I'm burnt out, the one thing that I will like die on my hill over is I tune out everybody else. Because the one thing I can tell you up here without any question is nobody gives my clients the experience that they get from me. Doesn't matter if they go to Helen, they go to Gavin or Austin, like I know that what I'm delivering, nobody else is giving them. So it's crazy because you're hearing me say that, but then I'm like still struggling and feeling so burnt out. But that's where all of our stories and all of our journeys, even with making music, like that's one thing when the imposter syndrome does creep in, which every now and then does happen to me, because even though I have Slice of Lime, that is a pretty solid brand and been around for a while, also building a second brand. So all those like baby steps that I had to deal with Slice, even though we are 3 photographers that are very experienced, we still deal with that imposter thing popping up when we don't get a gig or we see something, we're like, oh my God, we should have done da-da-da-da. So the biggest thing for everybody is no matter if we're all in the same thing, what you can offer, whatever sound you create, whatever little you do, that is going to be unique to you. And when that imposter syndrome creeps in, you just have to block it out. And sometimes for me, that means unfollowing people, or like she was saying, erasing Instagram, just because we get so caught up sometimes in what everybody else is doing that it starts to creep in and cloud. Holy crap, I'm doing something really awesome. So that's the one thing that even when I'm like freaking out, that I feel so creatively dead inside, I'm like, okay, the minute that client walks through the door, I'm freaking on. Now, granted, because I am so burnt out, when they walk out that door, I'm even more depleted because I'm not fueling my creative soul, if that makes sense.
When you have like the ability to retreat, I guess my question is like, for you, does it feel like a time constraint? Like you don't have enough time to give yourself? Or is it more like, I don't know. Like sometimes I feel burnout just from being a nurse. So I'm like, I'm just going to go to sleep for like 2 days. But like for you, yeah, like how do you like to retreat when you do have the luxury, whether it's time or like just something you enjoy? Like what's your go-to for that?
Working on it. That's why I'm so burned out, because I'm just having such a hard time. Once you kind of, it's not that I've lost my spark. I didn't, because how your conversation ended, I'm just like, forget what I was going to talk about, because it's so important. Like we don't talk about burnout enough. My inspiration, yes, I get inspiration from other people that I watch interviews of and other creatives, but my clients and their stories are what fire me up. I want a kid to see themselves reflected in their photos and it not just be cookie cutter of anybody else. So that's where I'm stuck. I pour so much into my clients that I don't leave anything left for myself. So right about now, when I'm done, I go home and freaking pass out and sleep. So yes, I'm depressed. I'm dealing with anxiety. I'm aware I worked in mental health, So that's the challenge. And I feel too like we don't have those conversations enough in the creative world. Yes, we want to hype you up. Yes, we all have this like creative spark, but what do we do then when you feel stuck? And right now, I'm sleeping a lot. If I'm not working, I'm sleeping a lot.
My name's also Gavin, so I'll just be Gavin too, because everyone's known that guy longer. I'm based in Lancaster as well. I make music, I record. Don't ask what instruments I play. I don't play any. But I've been like recording for a while. I'll self-taught. I know like I work with one musician, sound engineer and everything, great guy in Lancaster. Josh, he's a great guy. We're doing music now, but I never really had community. I came out of college, I was depressed and I needed to do music because I'm very involved in my faith with the Lord, but I was just kind of even like need an outlet outside of that. Then I overthink. So something that's always been hard for me is like I get creative burnout because I was grinding by myself, and it's fun. So you're like a kid finger painting. You're just kind of figuring it out. Then after a while, you're like, wow, this is really hard to do by myself. This is not fun. So I think I have a hard time in general in the past year or two continuing to create like on a continuous basis, because I feel like it's all back on me. And I think the kind of music that I make, like you're in Philly, that's different. Like people in Philly, like they're doing that kind of music. Lancaster and York, I don't really know a lot of people that are doing that. So it's really hard to find that support and people who want to work with you. And also who don't want your money. That's also hard because I have bills to pay and I work full time in supply chain and stuff. So how do you find that community other than like you're paying people online that you're probably never going to meet, and you're spending the big bucks and you get good products, but you never really build a relationship? Like, how do you do that in order to continue to have a reason like, oh, I can get up this morning or I can get up after work and I can continue to make something I want to make without feeling burned out before I do it, because I know someone's going to back me up. I don't have to just do it by myself and be like, if it sucks, it's all on me. Like, so like, how would you do that? I'm not good at making community or seeking it out. I'm a very social person. So it just all around sucks because you just sit there in your room like, I'm never going to do this.
Honestly, dude, you just got to up and go elsewhere to like find community. It doesn't mean that you have to relocate, but you have to put yourself in those situations, as hard as that is. My closest photographer friends outside of the two that I own Source with are nowhere local. Some of my best photographer friends are in Arizona, Pittsburgh, Ohio. So as scary as that is, Alyssa, we talked earlier, this girl comes to all this stuff by herself. Like, she says the anxiety is crippling sometimes, where she's like, I'm not going to go. But when you're probably like, I was afraid you were going to say that. I can just see your face. Because it's really hard. I mean, it is really hard. The first like photography conference I went by myself. I didn't know a freaking person. And at that conference, now I have like 3 of my closest photographer friends, which were the ones that I road trip to Joshua Tree with, where I had my like revelation in the desert that I needed to leave my job and pursue this full time. So as hard as it is, especially when you feel like you're somewhere where you're not having your community needs met, you have to put yourself in some of those situations because you never know who you're going to meet at those things. Well, you just got to come to more silo stuff.
What you said earlier about pinning your past work against your current work really resonated with me in a way that is really painful because, and also just what you do is so courageous and also giving to other people. So I can see how it can be so fulfilling. And it's obvious that you are different from everybody else in the field, but just the fact that you still pin yourself against yourself, it just really, really resonated with me. But I also was wondering, looking back on the past 2 years, was there any point where you were like, that you can see that it was like, oh, this is where the burnout started? Like any warning signs where maybe you would have taken your career a little bit differently looking back, or things to be weary about as a fellow creative, I guess, who doesn't want burnout?
One of the things that I left out, because again, it's sharing and not supposed to be a therapy session, but I suffered a profound loss. My mom passed away when I was 21 years old in college. Anybody who's experienced a loss knows that grief is not linear. So for some reason, nothing to do with the pandemic or anything like that, it's been 22 years, and the last 2 years have been significantly hard, and I don't know why. Do I need to go see a therapist? Probably. But I feel like your mental state, if you are not making the time to nurture that, it can either be amazing for your creativity, or when your creativity also pays your bills, you can get stuck in your head. So for me, other than starting a whole second business, I feel like the pandemic year was my busiest year. I made the most money that year, and I'm like, you people are crazy. But my bank account was happy. But then leading into that next year, my creative soul and insides were not so happy. So gosh, I'm gonna have to go home and journal after this, because I'm like, oh my God, I need to write this all down. But yeah, I don't have any one thing that I pinpointed, but I do have to say, going back to what you said, my biggest competition is my former self. I'm always competing with myself to improve. But last thing, and then we're gonna wrap it up.
Over the pandemic, I had my high school community friends basically fall apart, which was good. It's good. Trust me, it's good. But so finding first Helen and just seeing how connected she is, it then led me to coming alone to silo events, but also my big thing of 2022 was I went to a queer club night by myself. I walked in the door, didn't know anybody. Well, I knew one person, but I didn't know where they were, hadn't messaged them. And I just made friends. I walked up to a group of girls. I was like, hey, are you guys looking for an extra? Whatever. And we had fun. It was a great night. And we left, we exchanged info, and they'll they'll see things that I post, I'll see things that they post. And yes, it might be shallow to some people, but to me, like it's somebody who's saying, hey, I'm happy that you're happy, and or that you're sad or you're upset or you're feeling turmoil or whatever. And then for you, so I work with my mom doing stained glass. And so over the last year, she's been feeling, I wouldn't say burnout necessarily. I don't think she's gotten there yet. But I could see her passion had kind of waned a little bit because we have retail. So we do retail sales. And for her, she was like, I don't want to go in. And I was already like, yeah, I don't want to get out of bed either. But like, that's not the same level. And so over New Year's, she was like, so tell me if this is a dumb idea. I want to maybe scale back or do something different. I'm like, it's not dumb. If this is what you want to do, there's nothing wrong with it. Because the thing is, she had told me a year ago that regardless of if what I'm doing right now is what I do in 20 years, doesn't mean what I'm doing now is worthless. Doesn't make what I did any less important. And we have a mutual family friend who in her 20s, she was Miss York County. In her 30s, she worked as a police chaplain. In her 40s, she did basket weaving out in Oregon. She's done something new every decade, and she's happy. She's surviving. And so I feel that a lot of creative people feel that they either have to do what they set out to do or they end it. And it's like, no, you can pivot, you can change. Yes, embrace the pivot. Because for my mom, it's more, she doesn't want to do the retail stuff. And it's like, okay, well, let me take over. That's a new thing that's coming in May that I haven't told anybody else, that I'm kind of taking over. I'm the boss now. While she's going to be doing more of what speaks to her. And I see nothing wrong with that. So pivoting is totally fine. And just because maybe you started doing portraits for one type of person doesn't mean you couldn't then go do sort of what you did in the beginning, and not even completely change, but add in more of what you wanted to do. Like you had said about attracting the clients that you want to make that work. I think that's perfectly fine. And you should never feel bad for wanting to do that, wanting to change, because we're all creatives. And if we don't change, then how can we create things?
Give it up for Emil. Oh, yeah, that's right.